I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are reading this highly familiar, incredibly ancient text.
Right. Something everyone knows.
Exactly. Like it's a text you think you know inside and out. Millions of people read it daily. Vast libraries of commentaries have been written about it for, centuries. It basically forms the bedrock of entire civilizations.
Yeah, foundational stuff.
Right. And then suddenly you discover that the standard interpretation of one of its most core passages is actually the exact opposite of what it really means.
Not just a slight mistranslation either, or some, difference in grammatical shading. We're talking about a complete 180-degree inversion of reality.
A total inversion. Because what if a statement that has been traditionally read for, well over a millennium as God gave permission or God allowed this to happen, were actually a devastating, biting critique of human anarchy?
Which is a terrifying thought, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. What if the text wasn't giving a permission slip at all, but was instead holding up a terrifying mirror to a society that had completely lost its mind?
Yeah, a society in total free fall.
Exactly. And this total inversion of reality is the absolute center of Dr. Khaled Waleed's groundbreaking architectural research. And today we're unpacking his entire linguistic blueprint.
Yeah, because Dr. Waleed's work fundamentally shatters how we view the evolution of divine law.
It really does.
His core premise, which he calls the covenantal architecture of devolution and substitution, it argues something that makes a lot of modern thinkers very, very uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
Built on incredibly rigorous textual analysis, Dr. Waleed proves that divine law, specifically regarding moral prohibitions, it has never changed. It just doesn't evolve.
It's static.
Right. Static, eternal, and it completely pre-exists human history. It is humanity's adherence to that law that fluctuates wildly.
So it's not the law evolving, it's us, glitching out.
Exactly. We are the glitch. I love that. And for you listening, whether you are interested in theology, linguistics, or you just love a paradigm shift that forces you to question how we read and inherit ancient texts, Dr. Waleed's framework offers this revolutionary lens on how humans interact with authority and with their own fundamental nature, really. It's a complete re-education on how to read.
It is. But I need to establish a really strict rule for our deep dive today before we get any further. Every single insight, every definition, every structural theory we discuss today is directly attributed to Dr. Khaled Waleed's meticulous research.
Right. This is all his framework.
100%.
Yeah.
We're just touring the architecture he has uncovered.
And, calling it an architecture is really the only accurate way to describe his methodology. Dr. Waleed doesn't just offer an opinion or a hot take on an isolated verse.
No, not at all.
He maps out a completely self-contained ecosystem of vocabulary. His method involves removing all that external historical baggage.
Stripping it all away.
Right. Stripping away centuries of accumulated human commentary and forcing the text to define its own terms internally.
Which is so rare.
It is. He isolates the specific vocabulary to show us the actual structural blueprints of how grace, trust, and law function mechanically.
Mechanically, yes. So, to understand the huge controversy surrounding that inverted verse we teased earlier, we first have to learn the language of the architect.
We need the lexicon.
Right. We have to look at Dr. Waleed's lexicon, starting with a word that carries an enormous amount of baggage in English, which is grace, or in Arabic, nima.
Nima, right.
Because when we use the word grace today, it's usually wrapped in this warm, fuzzy feeling. It's unearned favor.
Like a blanket.
Exactly. A feeling of divine goodwill or forgiveness. But Dr. Waleed completely rejects that fuzzy definition.
He does. Dr. Waleed looks at the textual roots and argues that within this specific framework, nima is completely devoid of emotion.
No emotion at all.
None. It is a precise, binding, tangible formula. According to his definitions, grace is literally an equation.
An equation?
Yes. The revealed book plus guidance plus the trust. That is grace. It is a package of highly specific instructions and responsibilities.
So you don't just feel grace in this architecture?
No, you don't feel it. You are handed it like a tool set.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy because I think it helps. Think of it like receiving a massive multi-million-dollar research grant from an Ivy League university.
Okay, I like this.
The grant itself, the funding, the state-of-the-art lab equipment, the access to the proprietary data, that entire package is the grace, the nima.
The tools to do the work.
Exactly. And because you were selected to receive this massive package, you get to walk around the campus with the prestigious title of lead principal investigator.
The VIP of the science department.
Right. And that status, that elevation above your peers, is the second crucial term in Dr. Waleed's lexicon, which is favor. Or fadl.
Fadl, right. And here is the core problem with human nature, which Dr. Waleed's framework exposes so brilliantly. We become obsessed with the fadl. Right, the favor. We get obsessed with it while completely ignoring the mechanism that actually generates it.
We want the fancy title without doing the work.
Exactly. We want the prestige of being the chosen lead investigator, but we forget that the grant comes with an ironclad research contract.
The fine print.
Yes! You have to be in the lab at 5 a.m. You have to publish peer-reviewed findings. You absolutely must adhere to strict ethical guidelines.
No cutting corners.
None. And that heavy, unyielding burden of work is Dr. Waleed's third term, the trust, or amana.
The amana. Which brings us to arguably the most unyielding rule in Dr. Waleed's entire system. He says, quote, no favor without grace.
No favor without grace. It's absolute.
You cannot claim the status of being the chosen people or the lead investigator if you have dropped the actual tools and responsibilities you were handed.
Exactly. If we apply Dr. Waleed's framework to your researcher analogy, the moment they stop showing up at 5 a.m.
The moment they start sleeping in.
Right. The moment they decide the ethical guidelines are stifling their creativity and they abandon the contract, a rigid causal chain is triggered.
A chain reaction.
Yes. If you drop the contract, the amana, you lose the grant, the nima.
Because you aren't doing the work.
And if you lose the grant, you automatically, instantly forfeit the title, the fadl. The university steps in and revokes your status. You're done.
What's so striking to me about Dr. Waleed highlighting this causal chain is just how meritocratic it is.
It really is.
It completely removes the concept of ethnic or historical or emotional entitlement from the theology. You aren't favored because of who your ancestors were.
No free rides.
Right. You are only favored for as long as you are actively bearing the crushing weight of the trust.
Dr. Waleed shows that it replaces a relationship based on historical inheritance with a purely conditional contractual relationship.
Which traditionalists hate.
Oh, they despise it. This is where Dr. Waleed's linguistic precision starts to make people very uncomfortable. We like the idea of permanent favor.
We want tenure.
Exactly. We want tenure. We like to think that once a group is chosen, they are chosen forever, completely regardless of their behavior. But Dr. Waleed's textual analysis proves the exact opposite.
It's honestly terrifying because it means you are constantly on the hook, you are never safe. And that inevitably brings up the psychology of failure.
Right, because humans fail.
We do. So what happens when an entire society decides the burden of the research grant is simply too heavy? What happens when a group collectively decides to tear up the contract?
That is where Dr. Waleed introduces a word that sounds incredibly intense, even in Arabic. Insilak. Linguistically, Dr. Waleed notes that insilak translates literally to sloughing off or stepping out of one's skin.
Like a snake?
Like a snake, shedding its skin in the natural world. But in Dr. Waleed's textual map, insilak has much darker, deeply self-destructive implications.
It's not a natural growth process.
No, not at all. He defines it as the total voluntary abandonment of the grace, the book, and the trust. It is the conscious act of stepping out of the protective layer of divine law.
So imagine you're an astronaut. You are floating in the absolute vacuum of space, and you are wearing a highly advanced, incredibly complex spacesuit.
Okay, I see where you're going.
That suit provides your oxygen, it regulates your core temperature, it shields you from deadly radiation. It is literally the only thing keeping you alive in a completely hostile void.
The suit is the grace. The Nima.
Exactly. The suit is the grace. But after a while, human ego kicks in. You're out there floating, and you start thinking, man, this suit is bulky. It's restricting my movement. I can't even scratch my nose.
I'm feeling oppressed by these life support systems.
Right. You think, the rules of this suit are oppressing my true, authentic self. I want to be truly free. So what do? You reach up, you unlock the helmet, and you voluntarily step out of the suit.
Into the vacuum of space. The psychology behind that action is what Dr. Waleed unpacks so thoroughly.
It's madness.
It is, but the astronaut actually believes they are achieving ultimate liberation. They confuse the removal of boundaries with true freedom.
A fatal confusion.
Completely fatal. Because in Dr. Waleed's architecture, stepping out of the suit initiates immediate catastrophic destruction. It's the illusion of freedom.
And Dr. Waleed proves this isn't just a sudden, instantaneous explosion, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't just say they stepped out and vanished.
No, he maps it out.
He maps out this forensic 7-step devolutionary process of insilac, derived directly from the text. It's basically an autopsy of a collapsing society. Let's go through it.
Yeah, he identifies a highly precise map of ruin. Step 1, according to Dr. Waleed's reading, is simply leaving the grace.
The initial twist of the helmet lock.
Exactly. You let go of the foundational text, you decide the divine law is outdated or too restrictive for modern times.
Right. And then?
Step 2 is becoming a follower of Satan. Now, we have to be careful here. In Dr. Waleed's structural terms, this isn't about, horror movie tropes with pitchforks.
Right, it's not a cartoon.
It means that once you are no longer guided by the divine compass, you inevitably fall into the gravitational pull of rebellious, chaotic forces.
You untethered from the spaceship.
Yes. You untethered, and now you are subject to whatever orbital mechanics just drag you down.
Which pulls you into step 3, which is becoming totally lost. The trajectory is entirely gone. You aren't navigating anymore. You're just drifting in the void.
Drifting, which then accelerates into step 4, complete moral collapse.
This one is brutal in his analysis.
Extremely brutal. Dr. Waleed points out that the text uses stark animalistic imagery for this stage. It compares the state of the slawed-off human to a panting dog.
A panting dog. Wow.
This is crucial because it illustrates the total shutdown of higher intellectual and moral faculties. When you step out of the skin that elevated you above the animals, the divine law, you don't become a god like you thought you would.
No, you regress.
You revert to base animalistic stimulus and response.
That perfectly explains step 5, losing the elevating power of the grace. Because Dr. Waleed's framework shows that the law wasn't a weight holding them down, it was actually a lifting force.
It was anti-gravity.
Right. Without it, the gravity of base human nature just completely takes over.
Which leads directly to step 6, clinging to the earth. Dr. Waleed explains this as total suffocating worldliness.
Just obsession with the material.
Exactly. The spiritual horizon vanishes entirely. The society becomes obsessed with materialism, status, and physical survival because they literally have nothing else left to look at.
They're trawling in the dirt.
And finally, step 7, following base desires, which Dr. Waleed explicitly connects to abandoning the true compass, the Qibla. They have completely lost their orientation in the universe.
It is a terrifying autopsy. And Dr. Waleed doesn't leave this map of ruin floating in the abstract. He applies this process to a specific historical archetype in the text. Bani Israel, the children of Israel.
Yes, he does.
And we need to be incredibly precise here about Dr. Waleed's definitions for the listener. He is not, and I repeat, not talking about modern geopolitics or racial genetics.
No, not at all. He is analyzing a textual archetype.
Right.
Within Dr. Waleed's architecture, Bani Israel represents the historical human incubator. They were the group that was handed the massive research grant initially.
They got the lab.
They did. They were given the grace, the book, the trust. They held the favor. But, as Dr. Waleed meticulously proves by tracing the textual narrative, they initiated insilac.
They took off the suit.
They are the ultimate case study of these slewed-off people in this framework.
But wait, let's look at the mechanism of how they sloughed off. Because when we think of a society abandoning divine law, we usually picture like a descent into absolute debauchery.
Right, like Roman orgies or something.
Exactly, like the students totally trashing the classroom. But Dr. Waleed points out that their rebellion took a very, very strange form. They initiated insilac not just by sinning in the traditional sense, but by inventing their own hyper-strict religious rules, by altering words and modifying the covenant.
And this is honestly one of Dr. Waleed's most profound psychological insights. Because when a society abandons the actual substantive moral burden of the divine contract...
Heavy lifting.
Right. When they drop the heavy lifting, the human ego still craves the feeling of piety. The ego still desperately wants the status of the favor without the reality of the trust.
They still want to be called the lead investigator.
Exactly. So how do they simulate it? By inventing arbitrary, surface-level prohibitions.
Oh, this is fascinating.
They make up complex dietary rules or obsessive behavioral codes, and they police each other ruthlessly.
It's performative piety.
Complete performance.
They step out of the actual spacesuit, the one that keeps them alive, But then they wrap themselves in tinfoil and start bragging about how heavy their new suit is.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. Tinfoil suits. Dr. Waleed shows that by inventing these self-imposed prohibitions, they actually altered the words of the text to validate their own cultural preferences.
They rewrote the manual.
They discarded the original covenant and replaced it with a human-made labyrinth of rules, and in doing so, they completely stepped out of the skin of divine grace.
So, if they slow off the grace, the causal chain we talked about dictates they lose the favor. The grant is revoked.
Instantaneously.
But that creates a massive logistical problem for the theology of the universe, right? If the universe requires a lead investigator to hold the grant, and the current lead investigator just abandoned the lab to, play with tinfoil.
God doesn't just let the grant sit there gathering dust.
Right. The divine framework abhors a vacuum.
It does. And this brings us to Dr. Waleed's exploration of cosmic geography and the law of substitution, or ELAL.
ELAL, substitution.
Yes. Dr. Waleed defines ELAL as the strict, unyielding divine law of replacing a slut-off people with a trust-carrying people. When one group undergoes insilak, a new group is brought in to shoulder the burden.
Because the universe needs an astronaut.
Precisely. The mission has to continue. And Dr. Waleed identifies this new group within the textual architecture as Bani Adam, the children of Adam.
The successors.
Linguistically, he argues that Bani Adam are the honored successors. They are the ones elevated and tasked with stepping into the spacesuit after the catastrophic failure of the previous archetype.
And what blows my mind is how Dr. Waleed maps this theological shift onto actual physical geography. He looks at the linguistic usage of two specific Arabic words, Medina, meaning the city, and Korea, meaning the village.
Right. And he proves they aren't just synonyms for populated areas. Like, it's not just demographics.
No.
They represent entirely opposing covenantal states. In Dr. Waleed's analysis, the Medina is the center for Bani Adam. It represents faith, active engagement with the trust, and ultimate reward.
It's the hub.
It is a thriving hub of divine law. The Korea, conversely, is the center for Bani Israel in their state of rebellion. It represents foolishness, the process of sloughing off, and ultimately, total destruction.
Okay, let me challenge this heavily, playing devil's advocate for the listener here.
Let's go for it.
I'm reading Dr. Waleed's work, and we are talking entirely about internal moral contracts, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about grace, trust, the psychology of performative piety, shedding your spiritual skin. This is all highly conceptual. It's ethical.
Very internal, yes.
So why on earth does a physical direction, literally pointing your physical body toward a specific building in Mecca or Jerusalem, why does that matter so much to Dr. Waleed in this framework? Why does a physical compass point hold any weight in a system based on invisible moral contracts?
It's a crucial question because you're right. To the modern mind, rituals like a physical direction of prayer seem totally arbitrary, like magic.
Yeah, it feels disconnected from the ethics.
But Dr. Waleed's framework reveals the underlying mechanics of it. He insists that the Qibla, the direction of prayer, is not merely a geographical coordinate on a map.
Okay.
In his textual architecture, the Qibla is the physical manifestation of the covenant itself. It's the very center of grace. It's the headquarters of the research grant.
So it's not just a test of, like, turn around and face the other way to prove you're listening to me.
Not at all. It's not a game of Simon Says. Dr. Waleed explains that when a people undergo insilak, they first lose the internal compass. The Qibla actually falls from their hearts because they have abandoned the trust.
The internal compass breaks first.
Exactly. Therefore, the historical event of physically changing the Qibla wasn't an arbitrary test. It was God officially, publicly withdrawing the keys to the center of grace from the slit-off group.
Oh, wow. So they broke the contract. So they're literally evicted from the headquarters.
Exactly. Evicted. They could no longer claim any authority over the geographical center of that contract. Dr. Waleed proves that the physical shift of the Qibla reflects a massive cosmic transfer of power.
It's a changing of the guard.
It is the ultimate real-world manifestation of Ilal, the law of substitution. The keys are taken from the archetype of Bani Israel and handed directly to Bani Adam.
So the compass of the entire faithful universe physically reorients to align with the new bearers of the trust.
The universe literally updates its operating system to reflect the new management.
The elegance of that is just incredible. We have the grace, the trust, the devolution of sloughing off, and the cosmic substitution. Which brings us, finally, to the central mystery that triggered this entire deep dive.
The core controversy.
Yes. The verse about food that, on the surface, seems to destroy everything Dr. Waleed just built.
This is where Dr. Waleed's methodology truly flexes its muscles. I mean, it takes a sledgehammer to centuries of inherited lazy commentary.
It really does. So the verse in question states, and I'm quoting here, all food was lawful to the children of Israel, except what Israel made unlawful for himself. The Arabic phrase at the center of the debate is kulu atami kana hilan, all food was lawful.
Kana hilan.
Let's lay out the traditional view first, just so we know what we're dismantling.
Yeah.
How have scholars and commentators read this verse for the last 1,000 years, and why did they read it that way?
Traditionally, commentators have applied a chronological, developmental lens to this verse. They looked at the phrase, all food was lawful, and concluded that, originally, God allowed early humanity total dietary freedom.
Like a blank slate.
Right. The assumption is that divine law evolved over time. According to this view, God started with a blank slate, allowed everything, and then gradually started introducing prohibitions as humanity matured.
So they read it as a historical timeline of God's rulebook.
Yes, and they read the second half of the verse, except what Israel made unlawful for himself, as implying that the children of Israel basically jumped the gun.
They started making rules too early.
Exactly. They started making things unlawful for themselves before God officially introduced those prohibitions. So the traditional takeaway is, laws evolve, God hands out prohibitions gradually, and early humans had a divine free pass to eat whatever they wanted.
Let's pause and just look at the massive theological flaws in that traditional reading.
They are glaring.
If you read, all food was lawful, as a valid divine permission slip, you are implying that God originally left humans without a moral framework. You're implying God engineered a universe, populated it with volatile human beings, and said, go crazy, there are no rules.
Figure it out yourself.
Right. And then, centuries later, God changes his mind and says, whoops, actually don't eat that, it's bad for you.
It creates a catastrophic paradox. It suggests the divine operating system is deeply flawed and requires constant patching and updates because the creator just didn't anticipate the bugs.
Which makes no sense.
None. And Dr. Waleed completely rejects this. He argues that this verse is absolutely not describing a valid divine law.
Dr. Waleed translates and contextualizes this verse in a way that inverted my entire understanding of it. He argues that was lawful, kana hilan, is not a permission slip.
Oh.
It is a diagnosis of a disease. It is a description of a deviant, abnormal human state of absolute anarchy.
When Dr. Waleed breaks down the translation within his framework, all food was lawful to them means they were living in a state of utter moral lawlessness.
Purge, basically.
Yes, they were actively ignoring the original eternal divine rules that had always existed. In that moral vacuum they created through intellect, they decided everything was a free-for-all.
But then their ego demands that they still look pious, right? We talked about this.
Precisely. That is exactly what, except what Israel made unlawful for himself means. They abandoned God's actual law, embraced chaos, but then started inventing arbitrary human-made religious restrictions to simulate a relationship with the divine.
It is the performative piety we discussed earlier, the tinfoil suits.
The tinfoil suits in the middle of a riot.
Imagine a high school classroom. The regular teacher is out sick. The substitute teacher hasn't arrived yet. The students go completely feral.
Total Lord of the Flies.
Exactly. They're standing on desks, throwing textbooks out the window, blasting music. Absolute chaos. In the middle of this, the class bully decides to exert his own authority and announces anyone wearing a blue shirt has to sit in the corner.
A perfect storm of total anarchy mixed with arbitrary human tyranny.
Right. So the substitute teacher finally walks in, takes one look at the sheer destruction, and sarcastically, bitingly says, well, I guess there are absolutely no rules in here, except for the ridiculous ones the bully just made up.
Sarcasm is key here.
Now imagine if those students recorded that teacher, and for the next 1,000 years, subsequent classes listened to that recording and said, see, the teacher officially approved of our chaos. The teacher explicitly said there are no rules.
That is the exact trap Dr. Waleed argues textual exegetes have fallen into for centuries. They mistook a devastating, sarcastic critique of human rebellion for an official divine endorsement.
They read a condemnation of anarchy and proudly filed it away as a permission slip.
It is mind-blowing that generations of scholars miss this context. But, Dr. Waleed doesn't just rely on logic and analogies to prove this. His methodology demands internal textual proof.
Right, he has to prove it from the text itself. How does he prove this verse is a critique and not a law?
By doing what traditional commentators often failed to do, reading the surrounding text as a cohesive architecture.
Looking at the whole building, not just one brick.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed points out that in the very same chapter, in the exact same textual breath, the narrative violently condemns Bani Israel for breaking the covenant. It condemns them for altering the words of the text. It condemns them for slaying prophets.
Not exactly glowing praise.
Far from it. Dr. Waleed asks a devastatingly simple, logical question. Why on earth would God praise them or validate their legal framework in one sentence, saying, all food was lawful for you, great job, and then brutally expose their systemic, murderous corruption in the very next sentence?
He wouldn't. It violates every rule of narrative coherence.
And logical consistency.
Yeah.
Therefore, Dr. Waleed's inescapable conclusion is that the text is exposing a human-made theological disaster. Cunnihill is not a baseline. It is a massive deviation.
They sloughed off the true law through Insilak and replaced it with this toxic, chaotic mix of absolute indulgence and fake self-imposed piety.
Yes.
But wait, let me push back again. If human history is so dynamic, and if human societies are constantly evolving, we invent new technologies, we build new political systems, why wouldn't divine law evolve alongside us?
That's the modern assumption, right?
Right. If everything was lawful is actually a description of human rebellion, what was the original law? If they strayed from the baseline, what exactly is the baseline?
This is where Dr. Waleed answers your pushback by laying out the culmination of his research, the grand defense of the permanence of the divine operating system.
The grand defense. I love the sound of that.
Having cleared away all the debris of the false interpretation, he builds a watertight 13-point matrix proving the absolute unyielding permanence of divine prohibitions.
We have to dive deep into this matrix. What are the major pillars of Dr. Waleed's argument that the law truly never changes?
The first and most critical pillar of Dr. Waleed's matrix deals with the nature of time and preexistence. He proves from the text that divine words and prohibitions existed before the creation of humans.
Before humans even existed.
They are eternal. They are etched in what the architecture calls a preserved tablet.
So the OS was written before the hardware was even manufactured.
Yes. God did not invent the rules as he went along, reacting in real time to human mistakes.
No beta testing.
No beta testing. The moral framework of the universe, the definitions of justice, oppression, purity, and corruption, they are as fundamental and pre-existing as the laws of physics.
Gravity existed before humans learned to drop things.
Exactly. And divine prohibitions existed before humans learned to sin.
Which means humans were never, at any point in their history, left without guidance. They never had that mythical free pass period.
That is the second pillar of Dr. Waleed's matrix. The text explicitly states that angels taught Adam. The very first human consciousness was immediately uploaded with the instruction manual.
So there was no caveman period of moral ignorance.
There was no period of primitive moral ignorance endorsed by the divine. Furthermore, Dr. Waleed highlights a vital concept to tie this all together. Humans were installed with a fitra.
The fitra. Let's unpack that, because it's so central to understanding why the law doesn't need to evolve.
The fitra is the innate human disposition. It is an internal moral compass pre-installed in the human psyche that perfectly aligns with the external divine law.
Like a receiver for a specific signal.
Right. You don't need a prophet to come down from a mountain to tell you that murdering an innocent person is wrong, or that stealing shatters community trust. Your fitra, your pre-installed operating system, immediately flags those actions as fatal errors.
It feels wrong instinctively.
Yes. So Dr. Waleed is arguing that external divine law and internal human nature are perfectly matched gears. If the code is eternal and the human hardware is pre-installed with the fitra, the conclusion is inescapable.
Prohibitions are an eternal constant.
Eternal constant. There is absolutely no such thing as the evolution or gradual rollout of divine morality from Adam down to the Prophet Muhammad.
The rules of the spacesuit don't change because human physiology doesn't change.
Yeah.
We still need oxygen.
Exactly. But this matrix faces a massive hurdle, and Dr. Waleed addresses it head-on. Traditionalists look at verses where a prophet, specifically Muhammad, says, "I do not find in what was revealed to me anything prohibited, except a few things."
Oh, right. Because the traditional evolutionary reading says, look, the prophet is bringing a new, shorter list of rules. The law is evolving to be easier.
Right. They think the prophet is releasing software patch 2.0 that deletes a bunch of old, harsh rules.
How does Dr. Waleed dismantle that?
Dr. Waleed uses his entire architectural framework to prove the exact opposite. He argues this is not a new law being introduced. It is a restoration of the original eternal law.
So the prophet isn't installing a new operating system. He's running a massive antivirus sweep.
That is exactly it. Think about the state of the society the prophet is addressing. They are deep in the throes of intellect.
Code of rebellion.
They are suffering from the malware of performative piety we discussed earlier. They have layers upon layers of heavy, fake, bloated rules that humans invented during their rebellion.
They are weighed down by the tinfoil suits they made for themselves.
So when the text says, "I only find these few things prohibited," Dr. Waleed argues it is the divine framework literally uninstalling the fake prohibitions Bani Israel and others made up for themselves.
Deleting the bloatware.
Stripping away the human-made labyrinth and restoring the human computer to its pristine factory settings. The prophet is liberating them from their own arrogant, suffocating inventions.
Returning them to the sleek, efficient, eternal code of the preserved tablet.
It is so incredibly elegant. It resolves every single contradiction.
It really does. The law never changes. Human commitment is what fluctuates. The divine source code remains absolutely static.
Always.
What we see in history, whether it's the total lawlessness of ancient societies or the self-invented, suffocating religious prohibitions of Bani Israel, these are just human glitches. They are deviations from the baseline.
It brings us full circle to the sheer brilliance of Dr. Waleed's methodology. By simply insisting that we define words correctly, by demanding that we understand grace as a contract, trust as a burden, sloughing off as a voluntary destruction, and substitution as a cosmic necessity, he manages to completely dismantle centuries of profound misunderstanding.
He proves that divine law is an immovable bedrock, not a shifting sand dune that changes with the cultural winds of every passing century.
He rescues the text from being a messy, evolving scrapbook of changing rules and reveals it to be a perfect, symmetrical architecture.
And this is why Dr. Waleed's research is so vital, even beyond the realm of theology for our listener. It is an absolute masterclass in critical thinking.
Truly a masterclass.
It teaches us to fiercely question foundational assumptions. Just because 1,000 years of brilliant scholars have read a verse as a permission slip, well, doesn't mean it's structurally true.
It forces us to stop reading texts the way we want them to be, to fit our modern narratives of evolution and progress, and to start reading them the way they are actually built.
It teaches us to look at the load-bearing walls of a text, to recognize when a system is describing an objective truth versus when it is diagnosing a human disease.
Diagnosing the disease is step one to curing it.
Exactly. Which leaves me with a final, very provocative thought for you to mull over as we close out this deep dive today.
Let's hear it.
We've spent an hour exploring Dr. Waleed's framework of Insalak, this ancient, devastating process of humanity voluntarily stepping out of the protective skin of divine law.
The spacewalk.
Right. And they do it because they think it brings ultimate freedom, but it actually triggers a descent into animalistic moral collapse and suffocating materialism. The illusion of the spacewalk.
The fatal illusion.
So if the skin of grace, if the baseline rules of our pre-installed human fitra and the divine operating system have been completely static since before the creation of the universe, we have to look in the mirror.
Uh-oh.
How much of what we proudly call modern moral evolution or liberation or societal progress today is actually just us repeating that exact same ancient process?
That is heavy.
How much of our modern world is just us initiating Insalak all over again, stepping out of our own fundamental human nature and arrogantly pretending we can survive the vacuum of space without a suit?
That is a deeply, deeply uncomfortable question. But, thanks to Dr. Waleed's architectural blueprint, we now have the vocabulary to actually answer it.
We do, and we have to use it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Dr. Khaled Waleed's incredible linguistic and theological research. Keep questioning the baseline. Keep checking your suit. We'll see you next time.